Welcome to Heavy Revy TV. I'm your host, Brian Christian, and I'm excited today about talking about some of the divine encounters I've had. I don't think I've taken one whole segment and just talked about the encounters I've walked in and have experienced, what preceded them and what followed these encounters, as in fruit in my life, how these things were applied in my life. I've shared some of my encounters on different videos, but I don't think I've shared it just on this. So this is going to be really fun this morning. I'm really excited. And I know for some of you, it might be early. I know for me, it's early. I like to stay up late. I don't like to get up early. So I'm pushing myself by waking up. Welcome, everyone. And if you haven't pushed the notification button, push that now so that all future videos, you get a little notification on your Facebook. And if you're on YouTube, hit subscribe. And that way you won't miss anything coming up. Good morning, Donovan. Good morning, Charlotte. I know there's others on here. Good morning to y'all. I can't see who all is on here, but good morning. So I'm really excited. Before I get into these encounters, I wanted to read you two scriptures that point to where I'm going so that it makes a little bit of sense. The first one is in John chapter 3. And Jesus is talking here, and he had just talked to Nicodemus about what it means to be born from above, which means to remember your origin. And then he says in verse 12, if I have told you earthly things and you believe not, how shall you believe if I tell you of heavenly things? Okay. Now, what he's really saying here is basically there is no way that I can give you the pure unveiling of the divine just by comparing it to earthly things. And I think this is where we many a times begin in our journey, is when we start having encounters. The Father's given us a view of those encounters or an experience of it through parables, or that which relates to earthly things, that which we can relate to if we are stuck in an earthly view. This is where we see thrones. This is where we see scrolls. This is where we see, horses. This is where we see eagles. This is where we see a lot of different visions and encounters that are symbolic, that represent things in our life. And the Father is giving us those things because we can relate to those things. That's why Jesus spoke in parables, and he says the kingdom's like a pearl. It's like a coin. It's like a tree. And so this is where many a times we begin. Good morning, Daryl and Crystal. Good to see you. So we begin in these places. This is why it's not about comparing people's encounters of what's more, powerful of an encounter. It's not about anything to do with comparing. It's about where are you at on your journey of perception, and to what degree can you perceive, and to what degree can you not let go of certain perceptions. The Father will come in and reveal based on where you're at. So be aware that a lot of your encounters are going to be symbolic, because God is invisible. And the invisible realm of God, nothing can be compared to him, and there is no comparison, because pure heavenly things have no earthly grid. They have no likened unto earthly things. Now, just because you're seeing earthly things doesn't mean you're not having an awesome encounter. It all comes down to the season you're in, what is being emphasized, whether it is based in who you are or a mandate of what you're called to do in that season. And so you're going to have both of those kind of folding together, interacting together throughout your journey. The other scripture that I got is in 1 Corinthians 2. And this is an awesome chapter, because Paul is talking about demonstrating the Holy Spirit in power, your faith not resting in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. And then he talks about no eye has seen, verse 9, It says, but as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither has it entered into the heart of man the things which God has prepared for them that love him. But God has revealed them unto us by his Spirit. For the Spirit searches all things, yea, the deep things of God. So you have the all things encounter, and you have the deep things of God, right? Encounter and revelation. And then it says, for what man knows the things of a man except the spirit of man which is in him? Even so the things of God knows no man but the Spirit of God. Now here it's not saying you cannot see or hear these things. What it's saying is by the natural mind, you're not going to perceive it. It's got to be by the Spirit, okay? And then if you skip down, it says here in verse 13, it says, let me start at verse 12. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit which is of God, that we might know the things that are freely given to us of God, which things also we speak, not in words which man's wisdom teaches, but which the Holy Ghost teaches, comparing spiritual things with spiritual. Now that comparing spiritual things with spiritual is where there is no earthly grid. This is the deep things of God. It's where you no longer have an earthly grid, and the Father is taking you beyond visible things and into intentions and into going beyond allegory into plain speech, going beyond evidence and into substance, going beyond the acts of God into the ways of God. And so there are many ways to look at this. And as you begin to encounter that which the mind cannot comprehend, you're going to begin to receive that encounter at a completely different level. And as you encounter it, as you've touched eternity, the next time you touch eternity, it will compare spiritual things with spiritual. So it's going to be reflecting off of the very image of nature and of that which is the why behind the what, that which touches intentions. Okay. I would connect this to the fear of the Lord, as we read in Isaiah, I think it's Isaiah 11, of which many people have misunderstood. The fear of the Lord has nothing to do with fear at all. It has to do with discerning his intentions. And so, so that's kind of the posture here. So let me just kind of give you some of my story. When I first woke up, the beginning of my awakening, and of course, when I woke up in duality and religion, but I also had a lot of encounters from the get-go. I was awakened in a very unusual way. My eyes were already open to, I don't even want to say my eyes were open to spiritual things. The curiosity for spirituality was definitely upon me. I was experiencing a lot of, demons in my life in those days. I was heavily into playing with Ouija boards right before I woke up, and God showed up on my Ouija board and spelled out the address, a time and a day, and said, "Go and I'll be with you." And then a mist of water hit me out of nowhere, and I was paralyzed for about 20 minutes as all this love was hitting me. And I know it's funny that it was a Ouija board that God used, but I wouldn't listen to anything else at the time. Anyway, I went, and it was a church, and it was a kind of a dead church. I find out later, 2 weeks after I went there, the pastor divorced his wife and became an Elvis Presley impersonator. And so, as you can see, the leadership of that church really had no identity, but and it was dead. Nobody was, being touched or anything outwardly, and nobody seemed to be in a good mood at that church. But I had an open encounter where everything went completely white, and I saw two hands coming out, and the hands were, size of a building, and coming out with holes in them, coming together towards me. And I ran to the front. They took me in the back, had me pray the sinner's prayer. This is in the 80s. And I left that place with ear-to-ear smiles, feeling all these burdens lifted. When I left, I was walking because I was a kid. I was only, 16. So I'm walking home, about a mile walk. And everybody, it was summertime, so everybody walking by, or driving by. Some of them looked dead and some of them looked alive. Some of them would look like skeletons to me, and others would be beaming like light. And I'm like, what am I seeing here? I didn't know at the time I was seeing those that were awake and those that were asleep, those that were self-condemned and those that were coming into love. And that was my first experience with God, open experience with God in that sense. And I did not really understand anything that was being preached that day. It was all twisted. My ears couldn't, I mean, literally it sounded like Charlie Brown, wah, 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 wah. So it wasn't like I had a cognitive understanding of the gospel. I still had no clue what the gospel was. I had no clue Jesus died. I had no clue any of that happened. Okay. All I know is I had this encounter with white light and two hands reaching for me that had holes in them. Okay. And when I got home from that encounter, I would say about a couple of weeks later, I had already picked up a Bible. I'm reading about Abraham and building altars, all the altars in the Old Testament, and they'd call upon the name of the Lord. It's so funny because I hadn't even tapped into the New Testament. I started building an altar in my bedroom, and I built it out of an old cabinet, and I put some holy water on it because I didn't know what to do. I put some incense on it. I put a Bible on it. I put a crucifix on it, and I put some communion on it. I just grabbed any element I could and I put it there, and I would kneel before this altar and cry out, God, come down like you did with Abraham and with Moses and with, all of them. And I remember this one particular day, I'm standing there with my hands up. By this time, I have about 5 crucifixes on the wall behind this altar. I was collecting them because in those days, all I knew was Hollywood movies that had, exorcisms in them, and I had experienced demons. So therefore, I needed God. So get as many artifacts as possible. And the reason I'm sharing this is going to lead into the heavier encounters. Okay, and I'm sitting there or standing there with my hands raised up, and all of a sudden I start to hear singing around me, female singing. Okay. And my eyes are closed, and I open my eyes, and on each side of me, and I was seeing this in the natural realm and with the eyes of my spirit, but I'm going to tell you in a minute how it's more important to see by the eyes of your spirit than your natural eyes, because you have no discernment with your natural eyes. You do with the eyes of your spirit. But I'm seeing these emerald. They look like they're made of emeralds, but not solid, almost like a liquid bendable emerald angels on each side of me. And they're standing there, and they look like feminine angels, and they've got their hands raised, and they're like, ah, they're like singing. And the brass crucifix on the wall started to glow green, like the emerald that they were. These were, I don't know, I call them emerald angels. And then little emerald lightning bolts started shooting off of the crucifix and off of the angels, and they were just going back and forth. And there was an actual wind blowing inside my bedroom with windows closed. My clothes were doing this. Okay. At the time I had long hair, so it was flying too. Okay. I was a hippie in those days. So that was another, and I'm feeling this lightning, this power hitting me. So I started out with visible experiences. I had no understanding of what I was encountering. I just wanted more. In fact, because I had no understanding, I became one of those people that were going around chasing prophets, chasing encounters, just trying to get the next encounter without really understanding the purpose of the previous encounter. And this went on for some years. This led to, and I'm going to share an encounter. I'm going to fast forward because I can say I can't count how many encounters I've had, but I can look at different seasons in my life in which it was a crossroad encounter. And those are the ones I want to focus in on, because all the other encounters are kind of summed up in some of these bigger encounters I had. And so I want to fast forward to 2005, where I had just gone through a divorce. My ex-wife we allowed a lady to come stay with us who had multiple personalities. And I thought, well, we're equipped to help her. And she came and ended up taking over my whole house, because I had some division with my wife at the time. And it was a tug of war, more of a spiritual tug of war, because back in those days I believed in spiritual warfare, and that became the point of contact to destroy my marriage. Anyway, this woman comes in, she takes over my household, steals my wife's heart, and they take off together as a couple. And as far as I know, before that, my wife wasn't gay, but she definitely was after that, and took off with my newborn son. And my newborn son's name is Gabriel. Okay. Gabriel Michael Christian. All right. So yes, I do have other kids out there. And so she takes off with my son. I'm devastated. I'm broken. I have nothing. I have no way to keep the apartment I'm at. I lost provision stopped coming in. Wife left. And anytime, if you're in ministry, the wife leaves or the spouse leaves, your ministry pretty much is over in those days. Because if you have any issues in your family or anything like that, people go away. They don't want to receive from you. It's just that simple. And I get it. A lot of the way we really see fruit in life is, talk to the spouse. That's how right? And so I get it. I totally get it. But anyway, I'm devastated. I'm just completely devastated in my life, and I don't know what to do. And so the father says, I want you to go. And it's a huge, like, whole block sized apartment complex. He says, I want you to go to the opposite side of the apartment complex and go to apartment number 7, knock on the door and tell them your story. Well, I don't even know who lives there. So I go over there, and I don't know these people. I don't know most of the people in this complex. I didn't really talk to them, and so I go and I knock on this random door, and a guy answers it. And he was a redheaded, kind of big, scary looking dude, ex-military. And he answers the door with this look like, what do you want? And he's a single dad with an 11-year-old daughter and I want to say a 2-year-old son. And anyway, he answers the door, and I just begin to tell him what just happened. Not just with my wife leaving and taking off with another woman, but some of the encounters I had with God that led up to where I was currently at. And this guy was not a believer. He was an atheist. But all of a sudden, he looks down at his arms, and all his hairs are standing on end. And he says, I don't know anything about that, but I feel something. Come on in. So this is at the time that, I'm homeless. I'm pretty much homeless. I've lost the apartment because she left, and then she came back, and I had to leave. She said, if you don't leave, I left that part out. If you don't leave, I'm calling the police. So I left, and that's when God said, go to apartment number 7. So I go there, and the guy invites me in, and he tells me, he says, you can crash on my couch for a couple of days, but don't be talking to me about God or falling down in the spirit or shaking. I don't believe in any of that crap, he said. I said, all right, no problem. I won't say a word. Now, if I was to describe this guy's life, he had a lot of addiction to prescription meds. He was on meth. He was an alcoholic. He was depressed. His wife had left him. He was a single dad. He was heartbroken. And so the guy just was miserable and depressed. He had physical problems, back issues. He had addiction issues to porn, to drugs, and he had quite a temper. And his kids would pretty much hide. Okay. So I'm just sitting there and I'm just quietly focused on the Father. And again, this is back in the days where, I have my own issues. Okay. I'm still dealing with inadequacy and pain in my life. I'm just starting my journey into mind renewal and doing inner healing and that kinds of things. So it was a different time for me. I had the revelation of eternity, of coming from eternity, but I was still stuck in duality. And I remember I was there 3 days. And on the third day, I'm sitting there. I haven't said a word to this guy about God. I haven't prayed over him. I haven't ministered to him. I'm just focusing within. And all of a sudden, we were sitting there and he's talking. He's walking around. I'm sitting on the couch. And all of a sudden, a cloud comes in. Just whoosh, this cloud just shows up. And as this cloud shows up, he starts to feel it. And then I start to narrate what's going on. And it just starts coming out of me. The glory of God is here. He's here to heal you. He's here to touch you. Anyway, the power of God knocks this guy to the ground. I haven't even got up off the couch. He's wobbling, falls down, begins to weep, begins to shake. His kids come out of the room. They fall out. They begin to go into encounters. The 11-year-old girl is caught up into the heavenlies and begins to speak out these visions as she's in a trance, and she's just shaking under the fire. I'm still sitting on the couch. I haven't prayed anything for anybody. I haven't convinced anybody that anything's going on. I'm just speaking it as I'm watching it. Anyway, they start to come to, and clarity hits. And, he, gives his life to God. And he's standing up just like crying and laughing, and there's breakthrough. And then we watch this cloud go through the wall into the apartment next to us. So we run outside and we stand outside the door of the neighbor, seeing what's going to happen. And you hear a couple screams go off in the house. And then you see two young guys, both of them in their early 20s, run out the front door. And they're running out and they're looking in the door. They're like, and they're looking at us and they're looking in the door. Do you see that? Do you see that? We're like, yeah. We're like, that's God. That's God. And the one guy, he's like a punk rocker. He's got like purple and green hair. And the other guy, he's drunk. And anyway, they're both like in a band, right? And so they turn to us. I look at the punk rock dude, and I think his name was Chris. I look at him and I said to him, "You had a dream two nights ago." And he said, "How did you know?" And I began to tell him his dream. And I've only had this happen like 3 times in my life. I told him his dream and the interpretation, and it had everything to do with him being launched into this season, into the supernatural, into a place of wonder, and how the Father was going to use him in creative miracles. And next thing you know, I'm living at this guy's house apartment number 7. He's paying me to watch his kids during the day while he works. So I'm now the nanny, and then in between that time and after that time, this other neighbors are joining with us, and we're having this little get together of having constant encounters with God. Okay. And those encounters, eventually I find out that from the manager that my wife, who had kicked me out and had taken over the apartment, she fled the apartment with this woman, and they permanently left. And so I went back to my apartment. I end up going to a church. There's another guy there. He ends up connecting with me. He needs a place. He becomes my roommate, so that now we can financially keep the apartment. So now this apartment becomes a hot spot. So during the day, I'm doing the nanny thing. This went on for about 6 months. And then the rest of the time, we're all gathering. By this time, we have about 12 of us now. 12 men that are gathering. This is going somewhere. Okay. So we would have these gatherings and there would be no, let's pray, let's study. It would just be constant realms. I mean, it was like these clouds would show up and everybody would just sit there and just speak out the visions they were having. Nobody was primed in this, taught in this. We didn't go to the school of the supernatural to learn this. We didn't, go to some prophetic training to learn how to see. Nothing wrong with that, but this was an outbreak. Okay. I remember one of these gatherings where we had neighbors that lived upstairs, and they liked to party all night and sleep during the day. Well, this one particular night, they were up there partying, and we were beneath them, or right above us, beneath them, having these encounters. And it was in the middle of winter, very cloudy and gloomy outside. And all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, the cloud or whatever seeped into their room. They became aware. They got triggered. They thought we were interrupting. We were being too loud. So they came down. I guess they knocked. We didn't answer because we were just gone in this realm. One guy opens the door and comes in to start yelling at us. And as he goes to yell, he's frozen. He can't speak. And his face is instantly sunburnt, like he had been skiing all day. And he hadn't been skiing nowhere. His face turned beet red and began to blister in the presence. All right. And then he turned around and ran out. I want to say within about 3 or 4 days, they moved out and left. It was crazy. Okay. Just crazy stuff like that. Again, it's not that God did anything to him. I think what it is, to some, we are the fragrance of life, and to others, we are the scent of death. Paul said that. To Israel, that pillar of fire was light, and to Egypt, it was darkness. So to the pure, I will appear as pure, but to those that are twisted, I will appear as a torture. So it all comes down to our mindset and how we experience this. And I think that's what happened to those upstairs neighbors. So anyway, as this is going on, and I'd say another month or so go by, I had gone to a meeting in which this prophet lady calls me forward, and she says, Gabriel is going to visit you not long from now. All right, you're gonna be have a visit from Gabriel. Now I'm thinking my son, because my ex-wife just took off with my son, who was 10 months old, and so I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to get my son back. Well, no, it was a few weeks later that Gabriel the Archangel shows up. Now we're all standing outside because just about all my friends chain smoked like crazy in those days. So we're standing outside, everybody's chain smoking, and I'm feeling this realm. I've been feeling it since I woke up that morning, like something's about to happen. There was something in the air. There was this crisp clarity and awareness. And it was going on all day. I knew Gabriel was in the atmosphere. I just knew it. I didn't know it cognitively, but as the encounter unfolded, I realized that's what I was knowing the entire time. And it was evening time, and I remember we're standing outside. Now this encounter I had all within me. Okay. A lot of these other encounters were external, and they were great things God was doing, but there was no real understanding of why it was happening that way. This internal encounter began to change all that. Now everybody began to feel a presence come. Like it was like they recognized the atmosphere shifting. They were frozen. They couldn't move. And so it was, they were experiencing it too, but they couldn't hear and see what I was hearing and seeing. So at that point, I said, Gabriel's here. I just knew it at that moment. I saw him walking, and I know people want me to describe what Gabriel looked like. It doesn't really matter because he looked different. I had 12 encounters that year with Gabriel, and each time he looked different because he was representing a different emphasis. But this first encounter, he looked about 14 or 15 years old. He looked like a young boy. actually very feminine boy in that sense. And he had blonde curly hair, not long, not too short, very curly, and no beard or nothing. Obviously, because he looked like he was 14, and he was wearing a robe and a breastplate and all of that. And you got to realize we have, again, the picture of what we think all of this looks like based on what we've watched on TV, what we've been taught. So just realize a lot of the encounters you get, don't get caught up in the visual as literal, more because a lot of it is symbolic, that's taking you deeper. If you only get caught up in the visible, oh, he looked like this, he was wearing this, you're going to miss the whole point that's hidden underneath all that. So look at it allegorically. All right. At the time, I looked at everything literally. So I still didn't have understanding until some years later of what that encounter was really about. So I felt led, let us all go inside. We go inside. I kneel. Everybody sits around and on the furniture, and I kneel in the middle of the room. I'm kneeling because Gabriel is standing right in front of me. And he's swirling these keys. It was a ring of keys, and they looked like ancient keys, and there were 5 keys, and he's twirling it on his finger saying, I wonder if they know I'm here. And he's kind of making a joke about it. All right. And he's twirling them, and he's kind of walking around in the living room. And as he stands in the middle of the living room, I fall on my knees before him because I know I'm about to receive something. As I fall on my knees, I am immediately beside myself, watching myself. And in being beside myself, watching myself, who I am as spirit stepped out of myself, turned around and looked at myself. So now there's 3 of me. And as my spirit came out of myself, turned around and looked at myself, my humanity that's sitting there kneeling, a door opens inside of me into a corridor down into me, in which I then, the spirit version of me looking at me begins to walk down inside the corridor of the visible version of me, if I can put it that way. I know that's a lot of me's running around. And as that happened, I was taken immediately into an omnipresent experience where I was having 3 encounters as though there were 3 of me experiencing them all at the same time. Not just in the room anymore. 1 was in the room, 1 was in the throne, 1 was in the Garden of Gethsemane. Okay, so I'm taken into these 3 experiences at the same time, and all I can call it is an omnipresent experience. All right, and there was these 3 emphases. The one that was present in the room with all the guys was watching Gabriel put keys on me. Okay, and I had my hands out like this as I'm on the floor. And there's the other version of me watching the coronation or this impartation, whatever's going on. And he takes these keys that he's holding in his hands, and he begins to drip keys off of the keys. The keys in his hand remained, but they would drip a see-through version of it, almost like a spirit, almost like if you would imagine what a spirit would look like coming out of a body, like in a movie, you see this see-through glorified version of somebody coming out of their body. I was watching spiritual keys drop off of these keys that looked physical. And as I had my hands out, he dropped 1 into my hands. I knew that was what was presently being emphasized. He then took 1 key, and he actually took a spiritual key off of the ring, and he put it in the back of my head. And as he did, a keyhole opened up, and he put it in, he turned it, and the back of my head opened like a birdcage door, like a double door, but like a birdcage. And when he opened it up, all these doves flew out of my head. And he said, I have released the Holy Spirit in your mind. And then the other 3 keys, he held over the top of my back as I'm kind of bent over, and they just dropped into my back. And I knew at that point, these were things that were to come. Yes, Daryl, it's funny because it was very much like the series Lock and Key. But this is back in 2005, so they didn't have the movie yet, but just like that. And And so after he drops the keys inside my back, then he pulls out these mantles. Gabriel pulls them out of him. It's almost like he just pulls them out from within him. And there was a purple one, there was a gold one, and he put one above the top shoulder and one beneath, near closer to the waist. Remember, I'm kind of now laying forward, so he's draping them over me. And then he pulls out this other garment that looks almost kind of like this tapestry behind me, but it didn't have jellyfish. It had stars and planets and galaxies. And he pulls it out, and it's this liquid looking cloth that it's realms. It's like dimensions. It's like universes. And it's almost like you could jump inside of it. And he wraps it around me. And that's when Enoch comes up beside him. And Enoch is there, and they're both laying hands on me at that point. And he said, "This is the Enoch anointing." And he wraps me with universes. Okay. And then I'm going to add what's going on simultaneously here so you can kind of see it. What was going on at the same time this was happening was the throne. The one in the throne room was that I was there. So if you can picture the throne room and the throne, and imagine this huge throne that's, you know, bigger than the Empire State Building, right? Like the seat of it is, you know, from the ground to where you would sit would be like the height of the Empire State Building. I mean, that's how high it was and lifted up, and all this light just flowing from it. And I'm at the foot of this throne, and down at the base of the throne on the front of it, it was almost like a golden throne, but it didn't have legs. It was almost all like cemented, like it was a cement slab set up like a throne, but it was all gold. All right. And with different jewels and intricate designs and all of this. And all of a sudden, out of the front of it, a door opened, and I went inside the throne. And inside the throne were treasure chests everywhere. It was a city of treasure chests. And the treasure chests were the memories of all humanity. It was almost like that which had been set aside that would be made manifest as revelation and awakening in your human experience. And these treasure chests had arms. I know this might sound funny. It reminds me of Pee-wee's Great Adventures. Okay, where the furniture talks and it has eyes and mouths and arms and stuff like that. But it was treasure chests with arms and hands coming out of the sides, and they would open up and talk, and there was eyes on the treasure chests, and the opening, the chest would open and talk. Okay. And they were all communicating to one another, and they would reach into one another and pull out faith. One would pull out faith, and the one across from it would pull out grace, and they would exchange. And it was almost like by grace through faith, by grace through faith. So all of these treasure chests were reaching into one another and exchanging what the other one didn't possess until everybody had what was needed. Okay, this is all going on inside of that. The other experience I was having at the same time was I was standing in the Garden of Gethsemane, and Gabriel is standing with me there, as well as in the living room, as well as at the throne room. And Gabriel is saying to me in the Garden of Gethsemane, he's saying, what do you see? And I saw Jesus kneeling, talking to the Father, you know, take this cup from me, nevertheless, not my will, but your will be done. And drops of blood were falling from his head. It was almost like he was bursting veins in his head through the pressure of what he was going through in his mindset. And it was, you know, dripping upon this rock he was leaning over. And these angels showed up that were wearing rainbow garments with creases that from top to bottom, they were creased about every inch all the way around. So all these creased garments that had rainbows in them. Okay. And these angels had a key that was suspended over their head about an inch and would just sit there and rotate, just floating over their head, one key. Okay. And Gabriel says, "What do you see?" And I said, "Well, I see the angels ministering to Jesus, who's, sweating drops of blood and leaning upon a rock." And Gabriel, and I said, "Are those ministering angels like it says in the scriptures?" And he says, "Those are the revelatory angels." He says, "Those are the revelatory angels that carry the memories of the law and the prophets. They carry the generations of Christ." And he says they've come to keep Jesus's mind in the clarity of the intention of the Father, so that he does not give in to offense as he lays his life down for love. And immediately Gabriel said, "Look again." And I looked again, and now it wasn't just Jesus leaning on the rock. It was all humanity as Christ leaning upon Christ the rock. It was like we were resting on the foundation of Christ in the form of Christ, fitly joined together. And the blood that was being offered through the eternal Spirit to purge our conscience from dead works was the blood dripping off of the head and was coming into contact with the eternal Christ. It was this divine exchange. Remember, the blood speaks, and it's the DNA, and it's the memories of God. Now, I didn't have a lot of that then, but I was encountering it. All right. So all of this is happening simultaneously. And man, I didn't realize it was going to take me 41 minutes just to share this part. So let me fast forward here. So after this experience happened, God opens up. I'm living in Sacramento, California, and I'm about 2.5 hours from the Bay Area, from San Jose, California. I don't really know. I know one person that lives there, a prophetic woman, Jewish woman, from South Africa, real strong accent, who I was in connection with. And she said, it was right after that encounter. She says, I had this encounter and you were here, and can you come and do a meeting in my house? And so that week we took the guys and we went to this house. And on the way there, the Spirit said, men always ought to pray and not to lose heart. It was in the scriptures. And I said, what do you mean? And he says, you will endure for the miraculous this weekend. You will labor. And I'm like, okay, what does that look like? So it was supposed to be a Friday night meeting. So we go there to do a Friday night. Thank God there's a 24-hour Starbucks that's always open right across the street, because I didn't know what I was in for. That Friday night meeting didn't end Friday night. It didn't end until Sunday around noon. 24/7. Nobody slept. Some people did. They fell asleep on the floor. People were coming and going. The house was packed up to 60 people at a time in this small little house, as the glory of God broke out from Friday night to Sunday morning. And people were going across the street every 3 or 4 hours buying me a Venti white mocha with 6 shots in each one, and I'm awake because of the glory, but this realm was just constant encounter. People would come in, they would sit, there would be a tranced out state, there would be a jubilant shout and screaming and roaring, and then everybody would start to shake and would start to speak mysteries. And the mysteries they would speak would be as though it was a conversation to one another, but it made no sense as an interaction or a conversation, but a divine exchange of mysteries being spoken. They would just start speaking about, and then there's a key in the cloud, and the cloud is raining gold, and the gold is coming. And then somebody else would say something back to that person. And then they would speak in tongues to one another, but it was as though they were having a conversation, and there would just be this sound. And then everybody would fall down again and shake. Nobody's laying hands on anybody. Nobody's speaking anything that makes any sense, but there's a divine exchange going on. Okay. And all these encounters. I remember this one lady who had, her jaw was crooked because she had been in a car accident. And every time she'd talk, she'd bite the inside of her cheek and bleed. Okay. And so her jaw's out of joint. Her hips were out of joint. One leg was like, I don't know, 2 inches longer than the other. She had a lift in her shoe. She had a spinal injury. She also had lung cancer, and she had some other disease. I mean, this woman was on her way out. She's there in this meeting. And I think it was during the Saturday night aspect of, remember, we're already in it for 24 hours. And I remember standing there looking at her, and everything went tunnel vision. All my vision went away. My eyes were open. All I could see was light. And she was in the center of that. And I began to stand there and just speak. And I didn't even know what I was saying, but it was like Jesus took me over and was having this conversation with her for 6 hours. Okay. That's what people told me. For 6 hours, Jesus stood there and had a conversation with her. And this engagement wasn't an instruction time. It was a conversation of bliss and words that wrapped around her like worlds. Okay. And at the end of that 6 hours, all of a sudden bones began to crackle and her whole body began to shake and her jaw cracked in, her hips came into alignment, her leg grew, the cancer left her body. Complete wholeness began to manifest right there. Okay. And we're seeing all kinds of other things. We're seeing feathers. We're seeing gold manifesting everywhere. I mean, all kinds of outward manifestations. All right. And so all of these things are happening. Now, this was my encounter with Gabriel. Part of it. There was my encounter with Gabriel that I had that night in 2005 that led to this outbreak was just the beginning. In fact, it began to break out it was a 2-year breakout that went from this home meeting to doing ministry all over the area to flying all over the nation from that year to then planting a movement that started with a gathering on the other side of San Jose, inviting 3 people. I invited 3 people, okay, to do a Bible study, and 80 showed up. And I've shared some of this story before. Hopefully, I'll share more in detail at some point. But I'll just say this: this is during that time. By this time, it's 2006. And it's the 100-year anniversary of Azusa Street, and they're doing a big event. 200 nations are represented. All the big names are going to be there, and they're going to try to, bring back Azusa Street. You know how the church is. We're always trying to go back and revive something that already happened. So I go to this event, and I'm in with Bill Hammond's ministry and Cindy Jacobs. And Bill Hammond calls me out and he says, "Do you do meetings in your home?" And I said, "No." And because at this time I'd been doing gatherings in everybody else's home and avoiding doing it in my home because I had some situations in the past where people would stalk me and I could never have any privacy. They would stalk me day and night for miracles and prophecies. And so I'd hide out and I'd do meetings at everybody else's house. And so I said, "No, I don't." And he says, "Well, your house is going to become a hotspot for signs, miracles, and wonders for the entire city." Well, I'm like, okay, whatever. Well, I wasn't going to try and make anything happen. But it was a few months later that a lady we were having meetings with 45 minutes from my house in San Francisco once a month, the last Saturday of every month, she had an aneurysm. She called me. She was actually on her way to the hospital, all of that. She lived. They did the surgery. She was fine. I visited her in the hospital. And this was on like a Monday. And that Saturday, we were supposed to have a meeting at her house. And she said, "You've got to have this meeting." And I said, "Well, yeah, but now you're contracting pneumonia. They're going to keep you in the hospital for this week. So we just need to wait. We'll just skip it. We'll do it next month. It's not a big deal." We had about 25, 30 people come into this meeting once a month in San Francisco. And she said, "No, I believe you're supposed to have it and you're supposed to have it at your house." Well, I had already forgotten about that word about Jesus is going to show up at your house and all of this. I'm so busy having glory in everybody else's house. I'm kind of avoiding having anything at my house. And so I said, well, we can just wait. She goes, no, I really feel like it's God. I said, okay, do you have people's numbers? I mean, this is going to be a 45-minute drive for people to change locations to come to my house. They might not want to drive 45 extra minutes. Well, all she had was 3 people's numbers out of 25. So I agreed to it. And so I called the 3 people. I think it was on Tuesday. And or no, I'm sorry, she had 5 people's numbers. She gave me the 5 people's numbers. 3 out of the 5 said, we'll be there. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Nothing I got to, I don't have to rearrange my house. I don't have to make room for 3 people. I got a living room that could fit easily, 15, 20 people comfortably. And so Thursday comes along and the father says to me, I want you to go ahead and remove all the furniture from your living room. I said, what? Why? He says, because this is going to be bigger than you think. I said, there's only 3 people coming. There's no advertisement. I don't have a website. I'm not really advertising anything. All these things are happening spontaneously. I don't have anything written down as a tenor at this point. Okay. And so I take everything out. I put it in the garage. God says, go buy a PA system. I spent $10,000 that day. I put it on my credit card. I bought 80 chairs. I literally wall to wall, all the way up to the back wall, to where if I was standing there to minister, I would literally have 2 feet in front of me would be the seating. I mean, it was packed. I fit 80 chairs in there with just a little aisle down the side. And as soon as I got the PA system in and the last chair lined up, I felt Jesus step into the house. The presence hit. I hit the floor. It felt like a half hour on the floor. 4.5 hours had passed, and that Saturday, 80 people showed up. And when I began to ask, how did you find out? They were saying a cloud showed up. Several people said a cloud showed up in front of my car. A presence hit me and said, follow the cloud. And they followed it to the residence, to where I was living. Other people saw grand opening lights over the house. There were no grand opening lights. And they said, and God said, you need to go. And they probably thought they were getting some special deal or something at a store. I don't know. Others said angels showed up and told them this is where you need to be and gave them the address. Other people had dreams the night before. So there were all kinds of ways. 80 people showed up. Power of God hit. And let me just put it this way. That didn't end for 2 years. We ended up cutting the back of the house off and extending it throughout the whole backyard and investing $200,000 into that project to house the people for this move, of which the city shut us down because of a church 8 blocks away was jealous because their people were coming and getting touched. Okay. And we had to move it into another building that you had to rent each time you borrowed it. And we had to do that while we took the city of Santa Clara to court to fight them for the right to assemble. And there was no places you couldn't get land to put a building on there. It was already zoned. All the zoning for churches was already filled up. There were churches that were 3 or 4 churches using the same building in that area, so you couldn't expand. So we were at I forget what it was called, but it was a place where they had several little buildings that people would rent for different events. And so we would do that, and we just pay by the hour. And so we're doing that for about 3 months while we're waiting to go to court. About a week before we go to court, I get a call from the mayor of Santa Clara County saying that God came to him and told him, do not touch this man and let him do what he wants. So we were the only ministry in all of Santa Clara County in the history of the Bay Area that was allowed to gather without permits, without proper exits. The building was not up to code. We didn't have a parking lot. This is literally in a local neighborhood with a parking lot about a block down the road that people would park at. So I was told as long as I didn't block the streets, No one would mess with me. And if you know anything about the laws and the zonings, how strict they are in the Bay Area, they're very strict. And so God gave the mayor the go. And so we canceled court. We moved back into the house. And these meetings went from 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. You could feel the presence for 50 miles. People would crawl down the streets to come to this meeting. We had a lot of the young people from Bethel, Bill Johnson's church, coming to get an impartation. We had Mike Bickle's team coming, saying, how did you get this realm? We've been having prayer. We've been having the house of prayer 24/7 for 7 years. I said, Jesus just showed up. I said, I don't know what to say. It just happened. And gold would rain. People would come in. This is the crazy thing. We had children all the way up to people in their 90s. We didn't have programs. We didn't have any rooms to put them in, just one big room. So everybody was together. We had 3 generations present. We had just about every denomination you can think of. We had Messianic Jews. We had Lutherans. We had Catholics. We had rabbis. We had Presbyterians. We had Pentecostals. We had United Pentecostals. We had just about every flavor you can think of, every age you can think of, every background you can think of. We had Germans and Jews and black and white and every kind of background, all moving together in a realm that when you would walk in and you didn't know, let's say you didn't know what prophecy was or the gifts of the Spirit or any of that, people would walk in and they would already have prophesied over 3 or 4 people before they got to their seat, lay hands on people. People would be being healed, and they didn't even know what any of that was. They were instantly activated. Everybody was instantly manifesting. I watched all this. When I would get up and revelate and let's say do a message, my message wasn't 45 minutes, it was 7 hours. Okay. And everybody would be on the edge of their seat encountering it. So this went on for 2 years. That was all out of the Gabriel encounter. That was that one night encounter that manifested all of that. See, the encounters you have becomes the tree that the birds of the air come and lodge in when your faith has matured to that level of shading others' awareness. Okay. Now this leads up, and this will be, I'm not going to be able to get to the 149-day encounter that I wanted to share. So I think I'm going to end up doing a part 2 on this. I'm sharing this for a reason. Okay. Because in 2000, when all of this, that was a season when all this closed down, and I met my wife, Shauna, we got married, and we ended up moving to Amarillo, Texas. And we were kind of in isolation for about 9 months. I had the same encounter I had again with Gabriel. Okay. I relived it, but this time I relived it. And I relived it twice. This time I relived it as I was now in the place before Gabriel came to give me the keys in eternity, where I was there with Gabriel, giving him the keys and giving him the scrolls of everything that he would give to me in the timeline version of myself that I had in 2005. So this would be in 2000 and beginning of 2009. I would re-experience how I had foreran Gabriel even bringing me the keys in the first place. Okay. As I'm experiencing that, I'm taken into another experience. And I know this is going to sound crazy, where I was actually Gabriel preparing my human experience to come to me, to give me the key, all as a thought. And so now I was all of a sudden getting the downloads of Gabriel's journey throughout the infinities and the divinities of God that led up to him manifesting as me, that would give back to him keys that would give to my human experience, that encounter I started out with in 2005. Okay. So I'm starting to see layers of this. That ended up breaking out, and a move of God that broke out in Amarillo, Texas, in all of these mansions with all of these Baptists, where we would come in and not even open up in prayer, not preach, not teach, not move in the gifts of the Spirit like you would think, but just simply stand there, and a presence would come in. And these are all Baptists that were just sitting there not knowing what was going to hit them. And all of a sudden I would just say stuff like, 5 angels just came into the room and miracles are happening on the left side of the room. And instantly people would start to scream, fall out, and start to manifest miracles and go into trances and encounters, and no preparation, no priming the pump. And that went on for about 3 months. That led to us being in a house training some people, that led to us launching back to California from Texas to plant another ministry, Awaken, that would go on for 22 weeks. In solitude with a handful of guys and girls that were being mentored and raised up and activated, in which there were similar encounters. I'm gonna sum this up because I do want to give you this next encounter, and I won't be able to go into a lot of detail on it, but I want to give you the heart of it. Every time that I had any of these major encounters, previous to the encounter would be devastation and the appearance of loss that would strip me of another layer of my need to conclude, of areas of self-preservation and insecurity would be exposed, that would shake me to the core, that would break me to the core, that would bring me to the point of total annihilation in my ability to even believe, that would launch me into an encounter, that would launch me into an outbreak of glory, that would manifest to the people accordingly to where they were at in the encounter I had, that would launch me into another season of resistance and devastation. So I would go from this devastation to revelation to reconciliation, back to devastation in order to manifest revelation, in order for ministry to bring forth reconciliation. So this was the pattern. Now, I'm not saying it's always going to be that way. I do believe we level out, because I have leveled out. But I'm going to take you now to another season of devastation where I quit the ministry in 2017 because I go through another betrayal, another loss, people coming against me, and I'm just done with it. I tried, it actually happened in 2016. I tried to wing it without feeling anything, just be instant in season and out of season. And at this point, I'm reduced to only doing Facebook and YouTube, and not too many people are interested at that time. And I'm just kind of trying to revelate, trying to prime the pump, trying to get through that season of pain and bitterness and wanting to just die. And because this was the team that ain't going to go away, and these are the ones. And, when you've been betrayed over and over and over again by all those who say they love you, eventually you're going to stop believing that people are going to stand with you. And I had come to that point where I had made the proclamation, this is the team, and if anything happens to them, then I ain't called, I'm done. So I'd made this inner vow. Of course, what happened? Everybody went away, and somebody came in and impressed them more than the revelation I was flowing in, and they all ran after that. Okay. And thankfully a lot of them came back years later. But what led up to this was I was devastated. I quit. I went and got a job in an RV resort. I'm going to be a manager. I'm going to make money. Forget everybody else. They don't care about what I carry. They don't honor the price I paid for what I carried. So you know what? I'll just be straight up. Screw them. Let them go through another drought. That was my prayer. Let them go through a dry drought for another 100 years. I can endure it because I've been a survivor. So let them go through a drought. Dry them up, God. That was my prayer. Okay. I was going through it. And so I'm working there at this job. During this job, I completely dry up. I have nothing. So you think, if you're going to act like the world, they're going to receive you. Nope. I was rejected on all sides. the church rejected me, the world rejected me. I didn't fit in anywhere. I'm completely dried out. I end up with a tooth infection. It infects all my teeth. I lose all of my top teeth. I go into debt. I go bankrupt. I have a mild heart attack, and I'm ready to die. Okay. I end up, thankfully, I went into debt because I had to get all these implants. And I end up having our friend Crystal and another friend Sharon. They fly out to hang out with us. Crystal Connard, who's on here with us. Crystal remembers this. And they fly out and they're going to hang out with me. And they're going to, try to convince me that you need to go back into the ministry, Brian. God didn't call you to do what you're doing. You're running. And I'm like, no, I'm all justified. And so about 2 days into their visit, I took a week off from work. I'm supposed to get a paid vacation. They messed up on the paperwork. They're not going to give me my benefits. So now I've got to be unpaid. And I brought this 2-star resort to a 4-star resort. Okay. So a lot of the other employees don't like to work. So I guess they didn't like me very much. I made them look bad, and now they're going to have to work to keep up with my work ethics. So I take that week off with no pay. And during that time, I'm encouraged. And all of a sudden, I'm feeling this stirring again, right? Like, yes, God's calling me. And Crystal and Sharon are just ministering to me. And so the glory shows up and begins to touch my heart, and I begin to get healed. All right. I go back, they leave, I go back to work. Now, after they leave, you know how it is. Your mind kind of goes, yeah, that was great and all, but I'm not just going to quit my job. God will bring more signs. That really wasn't enough to convince me it's time to launch out. So I'm planning on staying at my job. So now I've been at this job exactly 1 year. And when I started this job, I said, let me give it a year and then I'll know if I'm supposed to continue. So it was 1 year to the day when I went back to work after taking a week off. I go back in. I notice I'm supposed to open by myself. I go in and everybody is there and the lights are on. I'm like, well, this is strange. Why is everybody here? This is, I'm the one opening by myself. Nobody should be coming in for like 3 hours. I come in and I'm called into the office and I'm told that I'm fired. So they all decided to vote because it's slow season, and who are they going to get rid of? Well, we're going to get rid of Brian because he makes us work. And the manager didn't like to work neither. And so I got fired for bringing a 2-star resort up to a 4-star resort. So this was kind of crazy. So I'm about to complain and say, you know what, I'm going to go call the regional manager. You ain't fire me. I'm going to take your job. That was my mentality. And God shut my mouth. She gave me my last check, and get this, I got 2 weeks pay. So the pay I was supposed to get that I didn't, I got double it. So she's like wanting to get rid of me. So she gives me the pay. She gives me a week to get out. And I'm like, okay, whatever. So I leave. We end up leaving a week later out of the place. I had pulled all the solar panels off the roof of my RV to redo my roof when I got fired. So I now had a week to put everything on there. It's foggy. It's salt air. It's November. Okay. And of 2017, we get out of there. We have no money. We're bankrupt. Well, we have the checks and stuff. So we have enough to get started. My wife had gone down to part-time work. She now needed to go back to full-time. So there's all this transition. We've got 2 boys, and now we're going to go live at a rest stop. There's no place you can live in the Bay Area. You're on a waiting list for 2 years. So we pull it into a rest stop, and I'm going to begin to circle 3 places a day. I have to move it. You can't live at a rest stop. You're only allowed so many hours. So I have to go from the rest stop. Now this is in South San Francisco, right outside of Pacifica, where we were living. About 20 minutes from Pacifica, we go to this rest stop. As soon as I pull out, the glory begins to break out of me. There are 3 dings on my phone. Out of nowhere, people are sewing to me on PayPal. And I begin to go live again. And I begin to prepare for this launch. God's going to launch us. God's going to launch us. Do you think it happened in November? No, it didn't happen. It actually didn't happen until June 29th of 2018. Okay. And that from the time of that November, leaving in November, that RV park and going and living at a rest stop and moving the RV 3 times a day, living at the rest stop in the evening, and then the next morning I'd have to move my RV to a Target grocery store where you're only allowed to stay 3 hours. So that and then I'd have to move about a quarter mile away to a Lowe's, a Lowe's, home repair place. I could only stay 4 hours there before you would get a ticket, and then I'd have to drive back to the rest stop, and that's what I did 3 times a day. Okay, and so I'm doing that, and I remember. And I'll just kind of fast forward to about a couple of months before we launched, me saying, God, when you said you were launching us to the nation, I expected a little bit more than a 20-mile radius of moving to these 3 locations back and forth. So what's up? And he says, oh, you haven't gotten the revelation yet, have you? And I said, no. And about a week after that, I got the revelation. And it was, you gotta go low. I'd go to Lowe's. I'd go to Lowe's, then I'd go to Target, then I'd go to the rest stop. Lowe's, Target, and rest stop. So I go to Lowe's first. Lowe's, Target, and rest stop every day. And he says, you haven't gotten the revelation. You got to go low to hit the target to enter the rest. You got to go low to hit the target to enter the rest. I was going from Lowe's to Target to the rest stop. Lowe's to Target to the rest stop. And when it hit me that I had been circling outwardly and inwardly, an inward mindset, that the Father was trying to burn an image into my belief system, when it hit me, that's when we began to launch. Not long after that, okay? Everything was revealed and released. From November to January, we're circling. In January, an encounter hits me with Grace, our friend Grace, who's known online as Sapphire Grace, if you know her. If you don't know her, add her to your Facebook. She's been with us for several years, about 9 years as well, off and on. And she shows up. She comes from all the way from Delaware. She's going to be moving to Washington. And she knows that we're in San Francisco, South San Francisco, at a rest stop. She shows up there. And she comes with a glory realm. And she's going to be at the Fam Bam, by the way, this October, leading people into an eternal encounter. When she came to South San Francisco and hung out with us for a week, she brought an encounter with her. She began to break open the Ancient of Days. And the Ancient of Days is just a way in which we say that which is before the beginning, that which is the memory of the journey of God in his own mind into the purpose of a beginning and a visible human experience, okay? And she stays for a week or so. And at the end of the week, she's going to head to Washington. Well, a few days before she left, encounters started to break out. She leaves, and I continue that encounter. I continue that encounter for 149 days. For the first month, I have no understanding of where I'm at. We end up, I can't circle the bay anymore. We end up parking at an RV park in San Jose where we used to live years before. And the manager there got awakened. And therefore she let us stay there for free. But Shauna had to, drive 45 minutes each direction to go to work as we're transitioning. And I'm there with the kids because I couldn't drive. I was so whacked. I didn't know if I didn't even know I was on Earth. It was hard for me to clean, to make meals, to take showers. And I'm just like freaking out because I don't know if I'm in the body, out of the body. I don't know which realm is my reality. Am I really living on Earth, or have I been living in this realm and I'm just having a vision of being human? I mean, it was deep, but God had to take me. For the first 3 days of this encounter, I was taken into the void of the absence of all things. I was stripped of everything I had ever concluded on of who God is, what God is, who I am, what I am, all of that, all earthly grid, all ability to see earthly things was ripped away from me. And it was the most excruciating, painful experience that I ever had. It was almost like as Daniel looked into the visions of God and was sick for many days. I was being stripped of everything so that I could have no conclusion on anything, so that I could break through beyond the encounter of my current lens. And it was complete darkness. And I remember I knew that I was moving through that realm that I was sent in my human projection or human reflection, where I had lost my memories in entering this human experience. It's the place between that you are veiled and you don't remember who you are. And I call it the bosom of the Father, going in reverse. Okay. And I remember after that 3 days, I began to break out into this place of liquid black taverns with liquid black, everything's moving into this liquid black, like metal or onyx. It just reminded me of onyx that was liquid, and it would change forms. And I was moving in and out of this. Again, like I said, there is no earthly grid. And there was black liquid onyx that would fly in this dimension, and these black liquid beings that would begin to form as like black dragons, but they weren't evil. And it was this realm in which a moment in this realm was thousands of years of memories lived out. So in the previous encounters I had back in 2005 with Gabriel, it would feel like I was there for an hour, but several hours had gone by in time. In this realm of the Ancient of Days, or that which was before the beginning, in the why behind the what of intention to even have a beginning, was a blink in that moment was thousands of light years of lived out, like I'd lived out all these lives. And it blew my grid. I didn't have any understanding during that encounter. Eventually, the Father allowed third dimensional bridges to come in so that I could communicate this at a level. But I would literally be surfing in the cosmos on a star, and I would go within the star into a realm in which there would be all these worlds. I remember going into Metatron's cube, even the lines. I mean, I don't know if you can see this tattoo, but that's Metatron's cube. So if you can imagine zooming in on just one little part of one line, zooming all the way into one pixel. If you were to zoom into a pixel of a picture of Metatron's cube, inside that pixel were infinite worlds just in one pixel of the visual view of Metatron's cube. And I would go in there and I would live out alternate lives all at once. And I would be hanging out with these aliens in which I would look like them, talk like them. I remember I was sitting at a table with these tall beings with long necks and alien looking faces, but they look like something out of Star Wars. In fact, they look like those beings. If you remember when they made the 3 Star Wars that preceded the original, where Anakin Skywalker was, and remember when who was it? When not Luke, but Ben. When Ben went over and found where all of the robots were being made, the army of robots, and those beings that had made them, the ones that were really tall and skinny, they look like that. And I'm sitting at a table with them, and on the wall they have a picture of the crucifixion of Jesus, but it isn't Jesus. It's a alien on the wall. It was almost like the events we have experienced in our humanity was mirroring, but in all these different races. But it was not a human that was on the cross. It was It was an alien. It was the craziest thing. And I'm there speaking this language. It sounds something like, like that. Okay. It was really weird. And I'm speaking this language and I'm preaching to them the everlasting gospel, and they're being awakened. And then all of a sudden I'm flashing and I'm sitting with people and I'm continuing the conversation as I'm going from world to world to world. And I remember I'm sitting there with my wife all of a sudden. I said, wait a second here. How long have I been here, and how long have I been talking? And what's actually going on here? So I was zipping in between. I even was translating. Okay. And then I remember I was in this realm where wings, I was given these wings on my back, but they were like wheels. They were wings made out of wheels, but these wheels were wormholes. So I had wormholes for wings that I could literally place over people and throw them into these dimensions. And I could wrap them around myself and go into dimensions. And it was the craziest thing. So I had realms or wormholes that looked like wheels as wings. And I'm watching all these different versions of myself break out of myself and come to myself. In fact, I was sitting actually across over here in my chair. And this is our old motorhome. I'm sitting in it. Shauna's above on the bunk over the cab. I'm next to her in a chair lower. She's trying to sleep. I'm in this realm where I start seeing all these different versions of me sitting around the room, and they're like, hey, what's up? How's it going? And it was almost like all the different sides of my personality as individuals. And I'm sitting there watching this, and I'm like, what the heck's going on here? And one version came up to me and said, your time is up here. And I came up out of my body. The version of me in me at that moment came out of me and went away. And this new version of me came in and sat down. And it was a version of me that had been living out had mastered the realm of the Ancient of Days. And in this realm of the Ancient of Days that had been mastered, man, I'm feeling a realm breaking open right now. Wow. In this realm where this other version of me that had mastered this realm, it's as though I had walked through the 12 foundations of the New Jerusalem, which were 12 dimensions of the divinities of God, in which each time I had lived out that realm in God and as God, a part of me that had lived out echoed and remained in that realm as its own entity, in a sense, but yet a part of the whole that had stayed there to master that realm that would be useful at an appointed time. And so this echo of me caught up with me of a version of me that remained behind in that realm as the rest of me had moved forward. And it was the 12 foundations of the New Jerusalem with 3 layers. And each layer of the stones of these New Jerusalems would cry out, called, justified, glorified, called, justified, glorified. And I said, why don't each layer say something different of these 12 foundations, these 12 stones that represent a foundation and a layer of his divinity that is echoing as an eternity in these different worlds of God, unveiling himself and slowing down to a human visibility in which to bring forth the intentions of the why behind the what of this eternal Ancient of Days experience. And he said, because you needed to hear it all these times, because the human experience was the place of the veiling, so that everything you echoed into would begin to manifest. And you needed to hear that you were called, justified, and glorified that many times in order to wake up. Because the human experience was the experience of contradiction. It was the breaking open of all things and the testing of all things and the proof of all things. For unless you operated in a realm of contradiction, there was no proof that divinity could actually be divine without the contradictions for it to express through. And so I'm going through these realms. I'm throwing you out some experiences. And so immediately, as soon as the Ancient of Days version of me that had mastered that dimension, that had stayed behind to master it as an echo of me, had walked through into my human experience, now looking back as a now experience, as a now encounter, that new version of me, or that old version of me, sat into me. And as soon as it settled into me, I became aware of my surroundings as though I had just entered this human experience for the first time and needed to adapt. It was the craziest thing. I looked at my wife and I said, well, I felt like I was cheating on my wife with another version of me. It was crazy. It was the craziest thing. And instantly I knew everything that I was encountering, because this ancient of days version of me, who had already mastered that dimension, set it up for my human experience and another version of me to begin to receive it. It was like it all came together, and I knew exactly what I was encountering, even though I couldn't communicate it in words, because I had to come in demonstration of the Holy Spirit and power, because this realm was not a realm that you could compare spiritual things to. It was comparing spiritual things with spiritual, and I couldn't come with man's words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and power. And this realm that I walked in which at one point I walked through the umbilical cord of eternity, allegorically, and I was walking through this umbilical cord. I was inside of it as a road to Zion, as a realm that was coming into the very heart of the matter, which was going to enter the womb of the Holy Spirit. And I'd say it was about the size of a freeway in my understanding of it. It was huge. It was like 2 4-lane, going both directions, 4 lanes, about that side, but it was circular. It was dark, but in the darkness was all these veins all around, hidden in the walls of this umbilical cord, that I was traveling like a road. And this was just one aspect. It was also all within stars and galaxies and wormholes that I would enter these experiences. And you would see light flying through these veins. And as you would see light, and I remember as I first started this journey that went on for thousands of years, it seemed like, but only a moment. As I'm journeying it out, there would be this whoosh, and it would be light that would go through this vein. And you knew it was either coming from the uterus where I was headed, that was coming, it was almost like coming from the source that was, in which all creation was floating and connected to this umbilical cord. So it was like I was traveling to the umbilical cord, to the source, but whatever was communicating back and forth from where I was walking to where it was at was of the generations of the heavens and the earth. And there would be a sound, and I remember I'd hear Genesis, and I'd hear the generations, the earlier generations, and I remember hearing Abraham, and I remember hearing Moses, and it'd be, let my people go. And I'd hear the different promises and the different prophecies, and as though they were being lived out. And I'd get a download, and I'd be living it out through the people's minds and lives as though I was them. And then I began to hear the next generation, and the generation of revivalists and reformers and prophets of the ages, and all of their knowledge of God and all of their view and perspective. And as I begin to come to this generation, it all changed. It wasn't about getting God. It wasn't about judgments. It wasn't about proclamations of earthly things. It was the weeping of changing of the mind, of awakening to, I'm not all the things I thought I was. It was this perception shift, as somebody said on my Facebook recently, a perception revolution. And it was a weeping of forgive me, and a weeping of you're forgiven, and a reconciliation of humanity making restitution to each other. And it was this flow of unconditional love and embrace and oneness. And I didn't even have the revelation of oneness yet. When I'm having these encounters, even though I'm knowing eternity and I know I'm a son, I still believe people are going to hell in those days. I still believe there was an us and them. I still believe there was separation at a level. So I did not have that revelation cognitively, but I'm experiencing it as the veins of God. in this umbilical cord of the Holy Spirit, in which I'm living through the seven spirits as though they're seven worlds lived out in the unveiling of God within God within God, breaking out of divinity, out of divinity, out of divinity, and I break through into the light. This is just part of the experience. There's so much more to it than that. I'm only giving you about 10% of that encounter because I can't communicate the rest of it. But I watched as God handed himself off to himself. I watched not just into the Ancient of Days, but into the Head of Days. I watched all these different dimensions of God as he began to unveil himself to himself within himself and hide himself from himself to not come to the end of himself, in which manifested the diversity of God. I watched the lamb slain with the seven eyes as the idea of God in order to unveil himself to himself. But I saw these eyes not on a slain lamb, but eyes looking from before the beginning into the unveiling of a slain lamb. And I watched how we elected ourselves to manifest into the form of one man that would be appointed in a timeline version consciousness that would manifest as the many, so that all of us on this side of the spectrum of our experience would begin to look beyond and begin to not just look at the eye of God, but look back from within the eye of God, looking at our humanity. And it was this experience that led us to the launch. It went on for 149 days. And at the end of 149 days, we launched out and we left everything. My wife quit her job and we had no open doors. We had no provision, very little. I think Crystal was our only support in those days. And I think you were giving us about $300 a month in those days. She was our only support. And then we had another friend that began to support us. But to travel all over the nation, we did not have the funds. And we parked in front of a person's house. And God ended up breaking out over the entire region. We went live on Facebook and the whole nation broke open. And from that, the revelation of inclusion and of all the perception-based stuff that I once knew, in which now I'm flowing in all this stuff. All the stuff I'm flowing in today came out of the Ancient of Days encounter. But I had no understanding in it at the time. I was just blown out of my mind and blown into this realm in which I begin to see the why behind the what of the intentions of God to bring me into a place of becoming unoffendable. And I'm not saying I've arrived there. I'm still on the journey of unveiling this, but this is what the Father said. That 149 days, you will surf the wave of that encounter for 10 years. He said it will take 10 years to unfold what you experienced in that 149 days. What I experienced in the 40 days of an encounter in Amarillo, Texas, where me and two others were taken into divine encounters every night from midnight to 6 o'clock in the morning, in which I re-experienced the Gabriel experiences of 2005 in another whole facet in that 40 days. That broke out and lasted about 2.5 years. But that encounter, even though it had eternal significance, was still bound to an earthly grid of allegory and parable, because my mind was still seeing earthly things. See, that encounter was still earthly things. All my encounters up to that, I tell you earthly things. How shall I show you heavenly things? That's what Jesus said. Do you know everything that Jesus brought on the earth was considered earthly things? His glorified state, to behold him as he is, that you might be like him, in that place of glorification. The place that supersedes the earthly ministry is the place that, as we reflect that, we begin to break out of the earthly grid. Now, there's nothing wrong with an earthly grid, but there's a place of intention that takes you beyond the earthly, in which you see the why behind the what, and you understand why you're on earth. You understand why everything is manifested the way it is. And now you can tap into something way beyond the doing of God, into the being of God. And it is in the being of God that we are no longer offendable and that love breaks out in fullness. It's the place where in my Father's house are many mansions. And those many mansions are the heavenly places in which you are seated in him. And those heavenly places is being blessed with all spiritual blessing. And that spiritual blessing is all the versions of you in the interaction of God's experience of himself and of you. See, it's one thing to know your experience of God, is another thing to know God's experience of you and how God's experiencing himself as you. And that there is a lot of interactions going on and a lot of lives that have been lived out. When I say that, I'm not even talking about the earthly understanding of what people have heard even about reincarnation. I believe reincarnation is the incarnation that is ever living in a now place as one body, but as many mansions within one house, echoing off and echoing off and echoing off and echoing off, and simply being projected into our human experience as a memory, which is seen as people coming back, dying and coming back as another person. That's simply one minute subatomic motion of a greater whole that's happening at a greater level, almost like simply one little spoke in a wheel within a wheel. And I just am releasing this realm as I'm seeing it right now, as I'm in that dimension. For everything I've been experiencing, I've been in. And even everything that I've been sharing of what I've been experiencing, I've been within another realm, within a realm, within a realm of that experience, as I'm beholding the breaking open of a heart that's on fire. And I'm seeing within this heart golden lava coming out of the heart, almost like an eruption of a volcano, in which it is inevitable of an overtaking of the awareness of divinity that is echoing out, manifesting as multiplicity, as diversity, as humanity. But it is simply the sound of the expression of the kiss of God that is embracing you and enveloping you into the very heart of the matter of that which has been discerned and perceived as the seven thunders. The seven thunders, the fullness of that which is complete, that which is of the seventh day, that which is eternal, that which has never had a beginning or an ending as a Melchizedek order, that which is of a realm of the congregation of the north. I'm trying to bridge with English to give you a point of contact for the memories of eternity to break open, the eternal glimmers, which we would see in the opposite as earthly triggers, where somebody triggers you and you freak out. That which I am speaking is that which we exchanged in eternity and deposited in one another as wow moments or key words or visions that would be eternal triggers to break open the memories of your origin, the memories of eternal movements and motions in the mind of God, in the subconscious of God, where God is becoming conscious of himself, known as your human experience. And all of these elements and realms that are breaking open right now over you. I break open the scroll of your book. I break open the seals. I release the roar of the sound of send me that we exchanged in one another, that is now being unlocked as psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, making melody in our hearts to one another, is beginning to move in that motion of divine frequency and sound. I release the sound of the seven thunders. And see, I'm releasing that which is in the now of the seven thunders. For the seven thunders is the sound of the DNA of the Father, of that which you have always been, that is being released in what you've been called to manifest. That's what the blood speaks. That's the blood that is offered through the eternal spirit to purge our conscience. That is what is being unveiled. And I just release that realm. as wisdom is taking you in, as you as wisdom is meeting you, as you that is being taken into you, in him, which is you, as you begin to unlock and unlock and unlock layers of the mind of Christ, journeying through the water tunnels and the firmament above and the firmament beneath, as wisdom grabs you and throws you up into the dimensions of grace, as you come before the throne of grace, which is all hidden within the mindset of the intention of heaven and why you are connected with those you are connected with, of all those that have been written in your book, that which you are gazing into. So let it flow and let it flood you. Become aware. For these realms and these encounters I'm sharing are not past tense. They're ever present in a now momentum of the movements of the heart of the Father and of love and of intentions to restore to you that the years that the locust and the cankerworm has eaten, and to unlock for you the dimensions of grace in reconciliation with that which has been misunderstood, that can now become stood under as you stand on the edge of knowledge, to know knowledge, to know the ledge, to know the outbreak, to know the limitless flow. In all of the angelic movement, I saw these three beings that were built by the mind of spiritual divinity, that would be the point of contact of faith, hope, and love, that would then reflect us, slowed down to visibility in the embrace of that faith, hope, and love. All the symbology that you are needing is coming in. But the Father is about to break you out of the parable realm and allegorical realm into a plain speech realm, and with nothing can be compared, that's going to launch you into an oblivion of your own conclusion and an unveiling of the mystery and the spontaneity of God, that is going to cause you to embrace and unlock mysteries that no longer need an explanation or a conclusion, but a proclamation of an atmosphere that will simply shift and transform and unveil that which has always been. And I just release that right now. Whoa. I just release that. As many of you right now, your mind is literally, the top of your head is almost being literally lifted off like the top of a teapot, as what is beginning to break out is the lightnings, the thunderings, the voices, that which has no grid, as the Father begins to remove earthly things and begin to unveil that which is of the eternal mind of God, that which carries purpose and intention. It's now breaking open over you. So I just release you into the Ancient of Days. I release you into the Ancient of your days before linear time was recognized, even though it is an illusion, yet we put it on as a matrix to see things from another angle of that which has always been and that which has always been seen and that which has been embraced from every possible angle. Wheels within wheels full of eyes. It's every possible view of the eternities and the divinities of God as you've journeyed through them. It's the Ancient of your days, and it's a day that is like unto 1,000 years, but it's not a day that has linear time, but it's a day in which the day star has arisen in your hearts, and it's a day that is based in the memory of God. For every God memory is a day, but that day has no time, and it's ever lived in a now embrace in which everything you're ever experiencing cannot be past or future, but is a now memory of the very thought and intention of God. And so I just release that over you. I just release that over you. It doesn't need to make sense what I'm saying. Sense it. Break through the language that is earthly. Break through what you think it's supposed to look like. Break through and let go of the notion of the limitation of what our imagination is tapped into thus far, and receive the unlimited, receive the unlimited verse, receive the multiversal dimension of yourself as the very thoughts of God. For every version of you is simply one thought in the mind of God, gazing in on itself. And within that thought, it is ever lived out as a reality, even though it's never been, but has always been. It's a mystery, but now take hold of the mystery and let it rip through your conclusion. Let it rip through everything that you think is the end of the matter, and come into the limitless realm. Come into the realm of the overflow. Come into the place of multiplication. Beyond multiplication. What is beyond multiplication? I don't know. Exponential. Exponential is beyond multiplication. Infinity that goes on forever, that is all suspended within his eternity, his divinity and eternity. Eternity is not a place. Eternity is reality that is gazing into places of expression, places of lives lived out. Wow. Even as the light flashes between your synapses and is communicated through your nervous system and to your cells, all of that life is moving through all of those layers and elements. Just imagine that on an eternal level, in which you have been living within realm, within realm, within realm, within realm, that the worlds are framed by the word of God, which is the thought of God lived out as worlds. So I just release that over you. I just release that over you. Wow. This is what we are going to begin to experience on a regular basis. I am expecting a collective encounter at FamBam where all of us are caught up into the same encounter at multiple levels, at multiple perspectives. But we're all going to begin to enter into the rushing rivers of each other's spirit. And there is going to be a convergence. In fact, it's not even going to be, it's already happened. I'm speaking to it as past tense because all that you see in the future is a memory of that which has always been. You ever have flashbacks from the future? That's the eternal. Prophecy is flashbacks is a flashback, and a flashback is that which is past, but it's a flashback of the future, which has already been. We are just simply remembering and unveiling, and that is the posture of divine encounter. So if you want to encounter deeper, I want you to realize that everything you're believing to experience, I want you to see as remembering what you already believe to experience. And in that posture of simply gazing in to remember the experience that you think you've yet to have, you will begin to unveil the experience as a remembrance that you've always had. And as you're in that, I want you to become aware of yourself within yourself, having that experience, and then step outside yourself, behind yourself, and watch that version of yourself experience that experience. And then keep stepping out and watching the version behind you, having an experience of the version in front of you, until eventually you break out and are above an army of you, watching you experience you as God, in God, for God, through God, by God. And as that it begins to manifest, you will break out of a timeline view of yourselves. You will compare spiritual things with spiritual, and you will get beyond the earthly things of the earthly ministry of Jesus Christ, and you'll begin to enter into greater things than these shall you do, because I go into the Father. So I just released that over you today. And now it begins. Because now we will enter into a beginning that was before a beginning of the Ancient of Days. In the Book of Enoch, and I'll finish with this, in the Book of Enoch, Enoch comes before the Ancient of Days. And he sees some guy standing beside him, and he says, "Who's this? Who's this guy?" And the Ancient of Days says, "This is the Son of Man who was elected from amongst all these. He will be the one sent to bring redemption and awakening." He was elected from amongst all these. He's the firstborn among the brethren. That word among means from within. So the Father sent the Son, but within the Father is a bosom, and within the bosom is the Christ, which is the many as the one, the Elohim, that is the elected, that elected the elected one, which was them, sent in the form of him, and carrying the unity of the faith, and carrying the household of faith, in which Jesus overcame by the unity of our faith in the bosom of the Father as the Elohim. We were a part of the whole process. We were understanding that watched the unveiling of the intentions of God for the heavens. We were wisdom who built every part of the matrix we would manifest in the earth. Everything that we're here to manifest we're not building here. We're remembering what was built so that our labor is not in vain, because it's not about earthly things or earthly labor. All of these things are breaking open. But just realize we planned all of this out. And every experience you experience when you experience it is precisely set in place through what you partnered with and co-created with eternally in the plan of you experiencing it here at another level that would break open a completely different view. And it's not even about getting anywhere. It's not about coming to an arrival. It's about a holy interaction of God that is complete, that lacks nothing, that doesn't need anything, that doesn't need to be rescued by anything, that doesn't need to be healed by anything. All of those concepts are falling away as we realize there was a purpose a lot deeper and a lot greater than us obtaining anything. Even the truth you think you're getting is simply there for an embrace. So hold loosely everything so that you can experience it at a deeper level. Amen. I just release. I just release. I just release. For everything that I'm releasing to you, you're actually experiencing from within you. And I'm just a parable reflection of a deeper truth that's being projected through a computer that's actually the kingdom within you, looking at you as a parable, but about ready to become a plain speech. I just release that right now in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. You guys be blessed. I appreciate you. I love you. If you feel led to check out all of our other stuff, you know where it's at. The website's above. Today begins a new day. I can't wait to hear the report of how this unveils in your life beginning now. So get ready. Set your time aside. You ain't going to be able to do much today except encounter. So I just release you into that which is time to experience. Amen. Love y'all. Have a wonderful day.